Okay, made a mistake in not changing the lettering here, so I apologize. We'll go through this. Now we're going to talk about factoring trinomials when a equals 1. What does that mean? That means the number in front of your highest power. By the way, trinomial, it's got 3 terms. Okay, a equals 1 means the number in front of your highest exponent of the squared is 1. Okay, so these have a special way of factoring, and we're going to talk about that. So you want to have them in order from highest power to lowest power. And you want to find 2 numbers that multiply to give you the last term, 8, and add to give you 6. And I'm going to write down 2 binomials. I'm going to put x in these spots. And I'm going to think, what are 2 numbers that multiply to 8 and add to 6? What about 2 times 4? 2 times 4 equals 8. 2 plus 4 equals 6, so that works. So 2 and 4 are my factors. They're both positive, so my solution would be x plus 4, x plus 2. I could do 2 first and 4 second, doesn't matter. And so those are my solution. Okay, you can't always factor this way, but this works whenever it's a equals 1. Okay, what we're doing is we're undoing the distributive property. If I were to multiply this out, distribute and multiply this out, it would go back to that. Okay, so now let's look at the next one. All right, any common factors other than 1? No. We'll write 2 binomials here, x and x. I got to find 2 numbers that multiply to 32 and add to negative 12. So let's talk about this. How do you multiply to a positive and add to a negative? What times what multiplies to a positive and add to a negative? 2 negatives. So I'm going to have 2 negatives here. A negative times a negative is a positive. A negative plus a negative is a negative. So what multiplies to 32 and adds negative 12? What about negative 8 and negative 4? Negative 8 times negative 4 is positive 32. Negative 8 plus 4 is negative 12. So it's x minus 8, x minus 4. Okay. On the next one, any common factors other than 1? No. So I'm going to write my binomials here, x and x. I'm going to find 2 terms that multiply to this last one and add to the middle one. So how do you multiply to a negative? You have to have a positive and a negative, okay? So now I'm going to ask myself, how do I multiply to 40? Negative 40 and add to 3. Okay, what if I did negative 5 times 8? Negative 5 times 8 is negative 40. Negative 5 plus 8 is 3. That'd be x minus 5, x plus 8. Okay. All right. I'm just going to, I probably should do negative 5 times 8 is negative 40. Negative 5 plus 8 is 3. Okay. So I'm just doing those checks there. All right. Let's go to the next one. I got to find 2 numbers that multiply to negative 6 and add the negative 5. So how do you multiply to a negative? You have to have a positive and a negative. So let's think, what multiplies to negative 6 and adds to negative 5? What about negative 6 and 1? Negative 6 times 1 is negative 6. Negative 6 plus 1 is negative 5. So it'll be negative 6 and positive 1. Okay. Let's look at the next one. What multiplies to 15 and adds to 14? Okay, so 15 is 3 times 5 and 15 times 1. Okay, now do any of those add to 14? 3 plus 5 equals 8. 15 plus 1 equals 16. So none of these work. So what happens when you have no combinations that will of 2 numbers that will multiply the last number and add the middle number? If you have no combinations that will work, that means this is not factorable. So we'll call this prime. You could also call this not factorable. Okay, basically this can't be factored. We can't find a combination of 2 numbers, of 2 rational numbers that multiply to 15 and add to 14, okay? Now let's look at the next one. What are two numbers that multiply to 16 and add to negative 8? Okay, so I'm going to do my parentheses here. I need to multiply to a positive and add to a negative, two negatives. Negative times a negative is a positive, negative plus a negative is a negative. Okay, so I'm going to think, what multiplies to 16 and adds to negative 8? Okay, let's think about this. What about negative 4, negative 4? Negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. Negative 4 plus negative 4 is negative 8. So this one works. X minus 4, which you could also express as x minus 4 squared. Put that too big there. So it's x minus 4 squared. All right. On the next one, are there any common factors here? Yes, 2 is a common factor. So if I have a common factor, I'm going to take that number out to the left, and I'm going to divide the term, what remains, by 2. So 2x squared divided by 2 just be x squared. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 9 divided by 2 is 45. So I divide by 2, and I'm going to play the same game. The 2, I leave the 2 alone and kind of ignore it. Okay, I'm going to actually write 2 down. Write my x's. I've got to find two numbers that multiply to negative 45 and add to 4. Okay, so what multiplies to negative 45 adds to 4? What about positive 9 and negative 5? 9 times negative 5 is negative 45. 9 plus negative 5 is 4. Okay, place those in the parentheses. Remember, these two are interchangeable. On the next one, do I have any common factors? Well, actually, on this one, I have an x squared. This one we're going to talk about later in this class. I have an x squared in common, so I'm going to take out x squared. And I'm going to basically take out two x's out of each of these terms. So it'll be x squared minus 10x plus 21. Okay. I'm going to find what multiplies to 21 and adds to negative 10. What multiplies to 21 adds to negative 10. Okay. So how do you multiply to a positive and add to a negative? I need two negatives. So it'll be 21, 7, and 3. Negative 7 times negative 3. Negative 3 times negative 7 is positive 21. Negative 3 plus negative 7 is negative 10. So those check out. So this is my solution.